Great producer. See, he's all over it.
Well, see, and we actually talked about this. I talked about this with Denny, and he yelled at me and he was like, you need to be hitting record as soon as you get into any chat room, or anything like that recording, because there's usually, you'll go through and then before you realize that you've talked 15 minutes and what you're talking about is so relevant. So a lot of the podcasters out there and everything, they'll try to gain that rapport in the beginning, and you'll spend some time, 10, 15 minutes off camera. But in there's these great little, just either nuggets of wisdom or things that you guys talk about in exploring, to where, I think it was, I was on Combat Story and we had stopped record. And then I was like, oh, I forgot to mention that the cover of the book, that was one of the biggest things for me during the whole thing, because creating the book, putting the book out there, I have it behind me here, but on the cover, there's a flag, and it's these guys pulling it out of the rubble of, it was Cop Brunkhorst. So Combat Outpost Brunkhorst out in the Arghandab River Valley. And they had, the enemy had driven a V-bid up to this thing. And I mean, it was if I remember right, it was a dump truck. It was something like that. It was a 2,000-pound bomb. It was huge. And they just drove it as close as they could to the ECP and detonated it. And I mean, I still to this day, there was guys buried alive, and they're digging people out of the rubble and everything. As a matter of fact, the story in there about it was from somebody who was in 1st Platoon previously, who was also at Ground Zero. Well, not at Ground Zero, but he was headed over to Ground Zero with the New Jersey firefighter department in order to assist everybody during 9/11. And here he is finding himself, after those recovery efforts years earlier, here he finds himself digging his buddies out of the ground in Afghanistan, which is the whole, it kind of inspired him to join up. And somebody snapped that picture during the recovery, because the guys are going through afterwards, after everything was said and done, and they're starting to pull everything out after the initial, and somebody snapped that picture, and I can't remember where it ended up. It ended up somewhere where the guys were just like, that really embodies this deployment. It was knockdown, drag out, hit after hit after hit. You don't experience over a 50% casualty rate somewhere and walk away from it unscathed in one way or another. We had, just multiple Purple Hearts. Matter of fact, those there was 4 or 5 of them that were there that were just in the White House this last week. I don't know if Denny filled you in on that, or you saw anything of that so I've been running a social media for the book. It's at Damn the Valley Book, but daily, just the guys had sent out a lot of these pictures, and I post that stuff up having to do with that conflict. But here they are, 15 years later, being recognized finally, and it was the wounded heroes that were there. A few of the guys that had amputations and stuff. So, I mean, I get it on that end. And it was a Wounded Heroes Day celebration. And, it's good to see those guys being recognized at that level. So where it was a deployment where there really wasn't any medals given out, it was just, hey, you were infantry, you did your job.
Yeah. Doing your job.
That whole, well, there was other controversy during that deployment to where they got overlooked and passed over. They didn't really want the public turning towards looking at that deployment with what really happened here and why. And, it's unfortunate that it went that route, but now, I've got that book out, and that kind of started the ripple effect. I know. Let me finish the story about I'm on full ADHD mode because I've jumped all over.
I love it, man, because it's genuine and real. Keep going. Share your mind.
It is. These stories, like we've talked about it before, because you can talk about some of these stories, and people they gravitate towards it because it's life at these extremes. And it's with some of the best guys I ever served with. You can't ignore that fact. So it is when we gravitate towards those stories like this, when we're talking about the flag and pulling this flag out of the rubble and getting that picture there, but then getting it onto a book, 10 plus years later after that, to recognize the efforts there. But then furthermore, once I'm writing it and we have this picture and everything, and I'm talking with the guys during the building the book process and doing the interviews and everything. And that one that I was talking about with Ground Zero is Brian Erickson. He reached out to me and he's like, "Hey, Yeske, I've still got that flag, man." I'm like, what do you mean, man? And he's like, when we left, I brought it with us. Like, they put the other guys that relieved us, they put their own flag up, and I took this one home with me because I knew it was special to me, and he had since washed it a few times. And but when he handed this thing over to me, because he was like, "Do you think we can use it in any way for the book tour?" These guys are just incredible in the way that they reached out, supplied pictures, videos, the content to kind of build this thing, and the interviews. I mean, really, just with a lot of them going back to the Valley, some of them hadn't thought about it in a really long time. And after that conversation, though, it was like, man, I haven't spoken with anybody about this for 10 years. And it feels like a burden has been lifted in that way, just because they've never been able to regurgitate it or tell it before because of how hard hitting and stuff that was. And he, in trust, handed me over that flag and we worked together on it. And we actually contacted Fort Bragg, the PAO, and we contacted the unit, and we're like, "Hey guys, like, our original thoughts were like, do you want to put this in the unit display case?" Because a lot of units have that with their history and everything. And the guys were really proud of that, that deployment. Matter of fact, up and down within division, they still talk about 4th Brigade, and they still talk about the guys that were in the Argandab. And since then, there's been kind of a resurgence of that history, and there's been a focus on the guys that we've had that have fallen, to where now they're teaching alongside of, Private DeGlopper and some of the other stories that are historied within the 82nd. They're now talking about the guys in the Argandab and honoring the guys that we lost there, and they have them up on the wall, and they actually have these kids that come in, learn the unit history, and now they're reading these books. My old platoon sergeant, he just retired, he was a sergeant major, retired as a first sergeant. And he's like, "Yeske, you have no idea, man. Like, I go into multiple offices, high ranking individuals out here, and I'm seeing your book left and right. And I'm starting to see, and there's actually another one, and we were talking ripple effect. And, your show here is the asset mindset, right? And it's putting yourself in that place to be an asset to others around you, but attracting that end, but giving back into the community, because that ripple effect is real. And, we have the Devil's Playground with Andrew Bragg. And that was something to where, again, during the book release, during the book tour, it wasn't even him who had reached out. He was just kind of like, this guy's got to have his own agenda. And it was one of the guys, Dale Nolinger. He was kind of the de facto platoon sergeant at one point, and since then has really been the team daddy to everybody that was within Charlie Company's 2nd platoon. And he reached out and he's like, "Hey man, this guy's been writing this book. He's been traveling around the country for a year. He's living out of his truck, doing these interviews. But he can't find a publisher. Like, can you help him out, man?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, absolutely. Like, 2 Fury guys, no question. Let's do this. And made the introductions. I talked to Andrew, made some introductions over at the publisher, which was Casemate, which was another thing about that focus on military history, because a lot of the guys wanted that established record. And before you know it, 2 weeks later, he's giving me a call and he's like, "Dude, I got a book deal out of this. What do I need to be careful of? Like, what am I, and I've coached him through some of it. And it's been incredible to be there and still be there for some of those guys in getting these stories out, but then also reconnecting and the military has a support system, right? That's just built in. But we kind of lose that when we leave the military. Why? There's no need for that. Really, you should be keeping these relationships along the way and like keeping up with these guys. And we've kind of realized that was been the whole thing through this project is we are so much stronger together. You know, why are we going the four ways of the wind instead of, banding together, using our strengths? I was, kind of a nerd in a way. I was a radio guy. I wanted to go be an 18 Echo. So, that end.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I heard a little bit about SOPSI. We may get into that or not. I listened. I did my research. I was up late.
Oh, man.
So today on the Asset Mindset Podcast, we have a special guest. Unbelievable man. Amazing stories. You got to check him out. William Yeske. He's got the book, Damn the Valley. And man, let me tell you, you're going to learn a lot about men that have been through a lot and how they've taken adversity and he's changed it into creating something positive now in the world. And it's so wonderful to see these concepts that I talk about in the asset mindset. And you, William, or Will, I'll call you now that we've got a relationship a little bit, but you are doing it, man. You're living it. And when I say it, it's hard to explain sometimes what it is, but it is the changing of your mind to take something that was bad and I'm going to make something good of it. Yeah. You are taking something that was horrific, but during that horrific time, I'm sure you saw a lot of acts of love, people willing to sacrifice, doing amazing things. And when people tell me, war is hell, you're absolutely right. But in hell, I've seen some of the most loving things, people, relationships, and I think it's fantastic what you're doing. Do you want to share a little more about what it is you're doing with your book? I know you've spoken a lot before on other podcasts, but I'd love to hear from you what you're doing right now and also how you've taken the adversity that you've been through and turned it into the positive.
Daniel, man, I got to say, it's been an honor and really to be introduced like that. I mean, thank you. Kind words. This has just been, it's something that's been a progression along the way. Really before I came on here, something just kind of was going through my mind about it. And it's, I think the first time I ever heard it was on Rogan with Mike Tyson, but it's like, God will give you everything you want just to see if you can handle it. Man, because, here we are, you're in the phases of building, this content and this podcast and everything. And you're realizing, we were talking beforehand, you're realizing just how much work it is. You've been on some others before as well. And you got to put in those reps. You got to do that. And I'm sure at one point, because I know I had mine to where it was finally like, okay, like I've done X amount and I'm finally starting to get okay talking out there. I felt like after 50, but
yeah,
you do.
You want to look at the person, but you're staring at a camera.
Well, there's, just all kinds. There's been the Zoom ones and there's been, the little guy and you go back, you're like, man, I was on a podcast. Like, this is great. And you go back and you look and it's like 7 views. Like, wow, I put a lot of work into like talking about this and I know I wasn't that great, but dang. So, yeah. But no, building really the whole intention through this too was not about me. And I think that's what made it special was the book from the very beginning. And I know I wrote it in a way, I wrote it for speed and I wrote it in a way to where it was kind of the hero's journey right off. But there was a few reasons for that. One of them being that we wanted to be at something from something different than anything else out there, a perspective from somebody that was lower enlisted, and to give that picture. And it's actually been echoed across, like, I know he was one of the guys that endorsed the book, but SAAC, John Troxel. So, this is the most senior enlisted guy out there. I think he was, oh man, I can't remember. I think it was the 4th. But this is as high as you can go, 30 plus years in the military, and saying to me like, thank you for writing this because it shows a perspective that we don't normally get to see. And it definitely is never seen in books. So like, thank you for putting this down. And I didn't really think of it in that way, but with coaching, with talking with the guys, or rebuilding the support system along the way, the company's now talking again. And some of it is with those stories, and I'll post something, I try not to, I talked about the guys in the beginning about it, but I try not to, I'm not actually tagging the guys who are actually there in it, but just because some guys are like, hey, I don't want that type of attention. They're just so humble about all of it. And I'm like, you've done such great things, but I get it. And I also understand that some of them will use that and fall into a trap. I've seen it out there within the veteran community of they're beating their chest and look at me, look what I've done. So I've taken a lot of that, and I took a lot from the guys, and I even charged them to, if you ever see me going that route, pull me aside, call me out. Do not be afraid to do that. But it's making those extreme relationships and those relationships that we build overseas in these extreme moments, whether it's trauma bonding, or just the fact that we did a hard thing and we did it together and we got through it together using our different strengths and realizing that we are stronger together as a community, but rebuilding that through this, getting the guys talking again. And I'll put something up, man, I remember that. And you just see the flurry of talk across there, or you'll see it posted across one of their socials. And that right there to me is special. That's where I'm not trying to be the barstool guy, from high school, the high school football team. I was a big guy back in, 30 years ago. And it's like, okay, 30 years ago, what are you doing now? So that's not what any of this ever was. And I hope it's never taken that way. I know there's going to be people out there, they're going to see it that way, and already have. If you look through, you get told, don't look at the reviews. And you look through and you're like, oh man, but at the same time, retooling your thinking as well and being like, that book wasn't for them, in the way to where I know who it was for, and really keeping that original goal in mind. It's like you were propping the guys up. It's not anything having to do with your writing. If anything, it's actually good that the publisher put it out a little prematurely. I think that was also partially me. There's still some errors and stuff in there, which makes me smile about it though, in a way, because I put them on the airborne timeline. They were sucking. But doing that and seeing the pride of those guys and seeing these stories lifting them up. And, we were talking before about the guys at the White House there, seeing that recognition at a level like that for those guys. I would love to see, the guys at Bravo Company, the guys at Charlie Company, or honestly, the Sergeants Major of Two Fury, in what they guided us through out there within a valley that was absolute hell. Both Command Sergeant Major Puckett and Lieutenant Colonel Genio were just amazing guys. And they ran a tight ship and it was disciplined, but in that way of, after you get into it, you're realizing why they did that. So, and
great stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's steeled me for everything that's gone ahead, and this has turned into something else completely. Like from there, moving alongside that other book, Devil's Playground, there with Andrew Bragg. That's what started my end of the podcast end, running veteran success stories. So I started a podcast from there, and that was really the very first one. It's goofy as heck. You still have me green as heck on there, talking to him, episode 1, but he was like, hey man, I just don't have enough content out there. I know you gave me the shows and everything else, but I haven't talked to enough people. I haven't been able to reach out far enough. I'm like, all right, I got to make it look legit. So let's put some framework together. And in a week, had gotten, I think we did it on the free trial of Riverside and, off some janky stuff, but we put it together, and I have the technical knowledge. So I put it out on RSS feed across globally, and it hit. And I was like, all right. You could actually see a visible jump in book sales and stuff for them. And I was like, well, there's something there. Like, should I lean into this thing now? And just instead of this being like a one-off appearing to be episode, should I try something? Like, why not? You've always had it in the back of your head. And if you equate it to the same thing with the book, it was always in the back of my head. You know, I even say it in the author's note at the beginning. If you ever told me 10 plus years ago that I would have written this thing, I would have been like, you're crazy. But it was always there, and always that little voice saying, hey man, you should put these memories down. When I finally did and finally faced it, look what it's come to. And it's been an incredible journey. You know, here we are 2 years after publishing and it's still going strong. And not only that, but we have this one's here too. Sons of the Argandab. So this is another one. It's publishing in a month, and it's the guys that relieved to Charlie in their area. They came in and they replaced them within hell, and they had a hell of experience as well. You know, it got so bad at one point to where they became static out of their base and couldn't even move 200 meters past the ECP. It was, they got pinned in. They were also a artillery. They were 320 out of the 101st, and that was when they were trying to put people in static positions within Kandahar in that region for the Kandahar surge, and they were getting their butts handed to them. Was it their job as an artillery? He even says it in there. It wasn't. We had guys that we handed off to, and we just looked at each other like, you got to be kidding me. Like, that's what they sent to replace us. Like, these guys are going to have a rough go. In the small time that we did have the chance to pass some of that stuff along, I think it was like really just 2 weeks. We got into them about it and we told them, and they did. They had a heck of a deployment, as you'll see when that one comes around. It's just these stories and the stuff that happened within the global war on terror. A lot of guys look at it as in like, we went through hell, but it's some of us out there. And I think it's a growing number that are realizing that was kind of your forge. What are you going to do with that experience, like in going forward? Because through a lot of this, through the book, through the podcast, through the people that I've started to talk to and connect with through all of this, without that, none of this would have happened. So I feel very fortunate, honestly, for having gone through that, because most people never have these type of experiences, or they need to shift their mindset. They need to shift their mindset into a way of life happens to you, but it happens for a reason. You don't always know what's happening here. You don't see the full picture, and you're not meant to, but it's up to you. It's your decision. And this all comes down to a, kind of the enlightenment on that end really hit home. I had kind of a psychedelic experience, to where I got to see the major splits in my life and where those people ended up. It was the craziest thing, meeting 100+ versions of yourself, but being able to look at every single one of them and see where their life paralleled with yours, and then where that decision-making matrix hit and where they split. And to see that in that form and to experience that was it was mind-blowing. But it was also that there was one of them that spoke for all of them. None of them spoke except for one. And they were like, now you see, you're on the right path. It's okay. Everything's led up to here, but you found it. It's going to be all right. And in moving forward and taking that knowledge and trying to spread it among the other guys and be like, hey, retool your thinking here. Retool the way you're like, life isn't happening to you. It's happening for you. You just don't see the end yet. Keep pushing. Keep going through. You're going to be all right. And especially the more people you surround yourself with in that mindset, or surround yourself with, that have gone through those things with you, the better off you're going to be.
Oh, absolutely. I love what you're saying. And I want to get more into, fear, because a lot of people, I think, get trapped by fear.
Yes,
You
they
know,
do.
what the future is going to hold if they open up and share their experiences, what people are going to say. You even mentioned a little bit about dealing with haters. You know, we all get them. And I do love that saying, like, if someone's hating on you, it's because they're below you. Nobody above you will ever hate on you for working or trying. So for all you listeners out there, don't worry about the haters. Keep pushing forward and go to what you want to go after. You know, chase
Daniel,
your
man,
dreams.
no, that is that right there. Like when you start to get the hate, there is, and this was a scientific, this guy broke it down for me. Gentleman by the name of Paul Holinsky, but he put it down into like a metric, and he was like, and you see the curve to where you're gonna have, no matter what, you're gonna have 20% haters, and you're gonna have 20% like, hell yeah, freaking you got this, man. And you have a lot in the middle that are gonna be the silent majority, but when those haters start showing up, you have to retool your thinking again and be like, man, why am I getting all this hate? Like, oh, wait a minute. Hold on a second. You're being noticed. You just don't see the rest of them that are also listening to you yet. Like they're out there because you wouldn't have haters otherwise.
No, absolutely. And I think that's so important for people to realize. And I'm glad we're able to share that with others because, you know, haters are going to hate. And we just got to push forward. And I like how you were also talking about focus. Like, do you want to focus on the haters or do you want to focus on the positive? And I talk about the concept of being a page master. Like, turn the page, man. Don't read that negative review. You know, yeah, instinctually we all want to read it, right? And check, and what are people saying? Or, oh, this is bullshit. I'm not lame, you know? But when we shift our focus, and I think that's what you've done a lot with your work, and I totally admire and respect that. Can you talk about making that shift so that listeners can see and learn from you so you can kind of like pave the way for them as far as taking that mental shift and changing their minds from a negative or victim mentality even into something more positive?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things right there. You were just talking about the reviews end, or even like leaning into it a little bit. Like that was, you go out, and there was one event in particular. I was thinking it was a dedicated group of readers. At the end or near the end of the event, I actually asked them, I'm like, what did you guys not like about this book? And they all kind of like nervously looked at each other. And I'm like, look, I know there's feedback, like, and I just put something out there. I put a self criticism. I was like, hey, I didn't, honestly, the print version, I didn't like on how the typeset felt a little cramped. And there was this and that about things, and I've actually spoken to the publisher about changing that, but I want to hear from the other readers out there. What were the negatives? And one of them, was brave enough and they piped up. I can't remember what the exact, some of the terminology and stuff. They're like, it needed to be a little, there's a lot of acronyms in there and stuff. And I'm like, okay, military jargon and things. I thought I did okay, but like, what exactly about it? But lean into, if anything, and look at those negatives as what caused the problem. There was and I'm not saying to like read into it like too much. Like there are some out there that are just gonna, like you said, hate to hate. But there was another book prior mine. There was a Wall Street Journal writer. It was under the title Bravo Company. Good guy, Ben Kessling. He was actually a White House correspondent for a little while for the Journal, and covered a lot of the military stuff in the newsroom over there at the Journal. And just fantastic author. Decided, he wrote an article about us, and somebody approached him about writing in book form. He didn't want to do it. Tossed it around. Okay, I'm going to do it. And I ended up being one of the guys that interviewed with him, and I showed up in it. And there was a lot of guys that had a lot of issues with that book, but on the historical sense. They were like, hey, he didn't talk to these people. That honestly, that was not a fault of his own. If you actually go back, he put it out there to a lot of them. And it was, he could only go off of what information he had.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't there. And I think that's one of the things that with this one, I was there, but I was able to talk to those guys and hear the negative criticisms and be like, okay, So make sure for this book, have a dedication page to the guys that we lost. Make sure on this book, try and cover as many names as possible. Make sure on this book that you get what's important to the other guys and build it into here somehow. Because if you don't, these problems are going to perpetuate. And even so, to the fact where I leaned into my own faults in there. I think within the book, I save for one that was just pointless to put in there. I talked about every failure that I had on that deployment, up to one of them to where I really probably should have been sent out of country. We had a Mexican standoff. We literally ended up, I hit a truck full of Afghans. We were coming back. I had been up 72 hours on a mission, and it was super hot. And we were in this super long convoy that was just go, stop, go, stop. Had my window rolled down and everything, which is a big no-no especially on that route. But it's like, just stay awake. And I'm like, I'm good. Ended up hitting this truck, but like I dozed off and I woke up to like that red brake lights and then bowling pin Afghans, because there was a truck of commandos in front of us, and these guys just poof, and we're in an up armored Humvee. Crushed the whole bed right up. And thankfully, no one actually got hurt. One guy broke his leg. That was the only thing that happened. But everyone's adrenaline's pumping and everything else. And these guys literally line up in front of our Humvee, and the commander of that element comes up to my window and pulls his pistol out and wraps it on the side of the glass, and he's like, "Get out!" And I'm like, "Oh man!" And it's just this tense moment. And thankfully, matter of fact, our terp that we had later on in the Arghandab, he stayed with us. A guy named his interpreter name was Gucci, but he comes running up. He had actually worked with ODAs and stuff before, so I mean, he was just heavily vetted. Super good guy, and he de-escalated really quickly, and thankfully, just because we're about to go into this bad situation overall.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, just being able to talk about those sort of things and being able to present that negative, but be, hey, these are my learning experiences along the way.
No, that's amazing. Those moments in time, you're like, oh shit, this is going to go bad. I've had a couple of those. I think we all do. So for your listeners out there, see, you're not alone. The human struggle, experience, it has all the things. So many believe success, like you and what you're doing now, becoming successful, is just luck. And I don't think I think luck is a small factor and takes place, but I think taking ownership of your life will overcome, any bad luck. I think hard work, that's a concept I talk about, and that is so powerful. Can you explain how hard work, luck, and that relationship for you, and how, taking ownership has really helped you kind of overcome obstacles and challenges?
Yeah. So there was someone on the book tour, actually. I was going around and I had finally talked to someone that had a pretty decent following and everything. And them, out of all people, I actually was really surprised to hear this come out of their mouth, because they were like, man, it's really cool to see the instant success that you're having here. And I looked at him and I'm like, really? Like you should know, of all people, this is not instant. Like the road here, and we got into a little bit just about on how bumpy the road is and how many times it's a lonely place when you are searching that out and trying to find your way and get aligned with the right people. It can be a lonely place, because a lot of people aren't willing to go through and do the work to get there. I mean, I literally, thinking a year before, when I'm still writing this thing, was just thinking in my head, hey, if you're going to be showing up on appearances and everything else, what are things that you can do? What are things you can work on, at least in this way? And I mean, I literally got realigned my teeth during the process. you know, I mean, going that far though, of like, all right, so hey, here's the appearance end. All right, now I got to work on speaking. So I think at that point when I talked to this person, I was like maybe 35, 40 podcasts in. And I still was like, I need to work on how I'm discussing this stuff. People, it's either I don't feel like it's at the right spot yet. And having that strive for excellence, you don't go and do 50, 60 podcasts as a guest out there. Well, I mean, maybe there's some guys. There was one of them I actually had on the podcast for me. It was Nolinger, the guy that I was talking about before. He's a sales guy too. So, but he got on there and we talked for 2+ hours, in an in-person interview. And afterwards I was just like, it was like one of those Will Ferrell moments. Oh, I blacked out. What happened? But he was just so well spoken during that. And I'm like, how many of these have you done? And he is like, I haven't done anything like this. And I'm like, really? And I know it was just a conversation, but in that way it was a guided conversation. But in seeing that from him, that's a standout. And that's also recognizing talent. That doesn't come naturally. I am socially awkward. I'm socially awkward due to some of the stuff in my past, and I'm working through that. That's one of my hurdles to jump over and work on. But it's having that situational awareness of knowing that, like, hey, this is going to be a setback. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to just let that be that way? Like, do you have a clear vision of where you want to be on here? Sure. I would love to be on Sean Ryan or on, sitting down with Anderson Cooper, but was I at that spot in the beginning? Oh, absolutely not. I would have made a fool out of myself at that point. Am I at that point now? Well, I'm still working towards it. Who knows? But that's something to strive for. Like, have that vision. It's like the planning in the ODAs and stuff. Like, I think that's one of the things that they do. Hey, what do we want to accomplish here? Okay, let's backwards plan it. Where a lot of big army does the opposite. And it's I never understood that, but I definitely, when we went through that portion of planning and stuff, I think that was in the civil affairs course for me. And it really resonated with me, and I saw that and I was like, yes, you're focusing on the goal and you're working backwards. Hey, what milestones do I need to accomplish on the way to that? And that's all it is honestly just be like, hey, this is where I want to go, and set your goal high, because even if you fail or fall short of it, it's still way the hell higher than most people are ever going to get. That was one of the things too, is retool your mind, the education wise is where I'm going with this. GI Bill. A lot of guys out there, they'll get out and they'll go to a community college or something like that. Really, if you retool your thinking in there, and a lot of people don't know this, but the schools out there, the way they work for federal Pell Grant funding, or at least the way they did when I figured this out, was that for every one veteran that they are having at that school through the GI Bill and through some of the different things, they actually unlock federal funding for X amount more Pell Grants within their side. So you are an asset to that school. So start thinking that way. And that's how I went to a decent school for my undergrad, but when I turned and I was like, let me, who's the best out there? Like, let me see. Ivy League, right? Okay. Let me just throw some stuff out there. Let me see about some of the ones to where maybe hone my skill on a certificate program. And I threw a few out there, and Cornell gets back to me. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, never expected that, but sure. So I went through a program with Cornell. And then after that, I was like, all right, that was fun. I feel like I could do better here. Like, I need to hone down the business end of marketing, but where do I want to be? Well, I want to be at the executive level. So what do I have to work through? And then I applied for a program with Columbia Business. And when they got back to me, I was freaking floored. Like, I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So now I'm a Columbia alumni, Ivy League, to where before, I flunked out of UConn, not in the way of, I just never finished. I did 3 years prior service, and then my life, I was just all over the place. I was floating. I needed discipline. I didn't see it at the time exactly. I will say that when I was 18, I wanted to join the Marine Corps, and I never saw it in the way to where now I look back and I go, I think it was one of the people during the podcast tour that asked about this, was what drew you to the Marine Corps? And it started to get me thinking, yeah, you know, it probably was my cousin, and seeing the difference in discipline with him. He was kind of a rebel. He was, just a scrawny beanpole rebel kid out there skateboarding. And, that whole, the 90s, we had that mentality with the skateboard, that, anti-establishment, fuck the man kind of thing. And see that, and then seeing him join the Marines, and after Paris Island, he ended up, I think it was like a year after that. This was before he went to San Diego. Seeing the difference in him, the discipline, the focus, that he knew what he wanted and he was going for it. And to see that as myself, a kid, and then kind of, I guess, wanting that for myself, to where I was like, can you stand on your own right now? You're sort of just partying it up. You're sort of a turd. You don't really have direction. So really the Marine Corps probably would have been the best thing for me, because you look at it, I joined up at 26, so there's 8 years there where I was just floundering because I didn't make that jump. I didn't do anything hard that required that discipline to do it. And that's why I think I kind of took to the military there, because it was something that I needed. It was a shortcoming that I had, and I needed to get it figured out. And how do we learn in the military? There's two ways: repetition and blunt force trauma. So
yeah, the hard way or the easy way. If you're going to be dumb, you better be really strong, right?
Exactly.
Or hard. So I love this, and you're talking, and I think right now the concept we're discussing has a lot to do with growth. And I think people following you, people following me, they're trying to grow. So we all know you need to find your why. Can you share any tips on growth, or someone maybe already has their why? Like, you went back to school, you did these things to keep pushing forward, to change your life, to not settling. So let's hit on that growth so our listeners can get motivated and fired up, and they can start having their own asset mindset and getting out there and making change and doing amazing things like you are.
Well, that's one thing right there. Okay. So like those amazing things and stuff would have never been possible without the people around me. So that's one thing, is surround yourself with good people. Like that's one of the things when guys leave the military, they go right back to their hometown or something, and they kind of put themselves back into that environment to where they were before. And it's like, you're different now. You definitely changed. Like, you don't want to go backwards in your steps. You want to go forwards. Forge forward. Don't be afraid to. That fear that you're experiencing, in not maybe the hesitation of not wanting to do that, lean into it. Surround yourself with people that have that same mindset of growth. And honestly, take a good, honest assessment of yourself. If you look at yourself, you have flaws. Everyone's got them. You're like, all right, with my why, this is why I'm doing it, or this is where I want to go. Just small steps of improvement. It doesn't happen overnight. You're not going to be instant success, as they say. Like we talked about it before, the podcast thing that I'm running now, episode 1, I look back and I go, man, I look like an idiot in that jacket that I was wearing, at least on camera. So let me go back and look through the 50 plus episodes that I've done as a guest, and be like, all right, where did that look kind of click? All right. Hey, I'm wearing it right now. So when I get onto a remote podcast, this is where I'm at. This is okay. I brought a bookshelf in. I put a black curtain back here instead of a green screen, and stopped using virtual background. I went out, all right, instead of a GoPro or a laptop camera, I went out and I went to a camera shop, and I was like, look, I begged and pleaded with the guy. Like, what do we got that can just stream 1080? And, it's just a under $200 cheapy Sony 5100, but it works perfectly once you have your lighting in a studio, and it's everything that I need there. But just one small thing at a time, you'll get there. Just focus on that tiny thing, because if you go back and you can see the progression. I'm actually about to go back and I ended season 1, if you will. I think it was after 8 episodes, to where I was like, hey, I'm going to make a major improvement in lighting, so that's where I'm going to have my AAR. And I did. I did an episode where I just sat down, and that was weird. Have you ever done an episode where you just sit there and talk?
I haven't done a full one where it's just me talking. Nope. I've always been on the interviewee side and been interviewed several times. I've been blessed myself. And I think a lot of it is, like you said, the small little things that add up, and then people notice and you get invited on different things. And, I was blessed to be on Fox and Friends morning show one time, and that was incredible. And you never know where it's going to lead, just like you said. And surrounding yourself with people that are doers. I talk about concepts, the 3 main keys of the asset mindset, is taking ownership of your life, surrounding yourself with good people and in positive environments, and then being an asset to others. You do these 3 things, you learn these concepts, and it's life-changing. It's game-changing. Like your lifestyle, the things that happen, it's just incredible. And people don't realize those little things, like you said, and we're discussing now, they add up. You write 1 page, somebody writes a page on a piece of paper. You're like, oh, big deal. You wrote a page in 1 day. Well, guess what? In a year, you have a 365-page book. You know what I mean? So those little things, and use time as an asset, can be totally game changing. And I love it. And I want you also, you mentioned your podcast several times. Let's give it a plug. What's the name? Where can people find you?
Oh man, Veteran Success Story. It is just, and I know it's a long tag, but it is at Veteran Success Story, whether it's on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn. I stopped posting on X. Just there's a lot of, surrounding yourself with good people. And it just seems to be, anytime I go on there, it's a toilet bowl. And I'm like, it's getting worse. Like I think I'm done supporting this platform. But, those are the 4 that I majorly hit. And honestly, okay, so it's Tooled Veteran Success Story, but it is not my success. Matter of fact, I still don't see myself as a success, which to some might be like, well, you've done this other stuff. That is honestly due to what we were just saying, the people that have been around, or the stories, those opportunities and stuff. I'm still searching on that end. And it's other people that I see out there that are successful in what they do, that I'm hoping to inspire others to take that mantle up and say, hey, you know what? I want to move forward too in this. Like, how can I start doing that? I resonate with, one of them I had on there more recently, Russell Worth Parker, and he was talking about using writing as a therapy, and I saw that gain through the book end. People don't realize that when you put this stuff down, but when you put it actually down on paper, not talking about it, because one guy came back and he tried doing it this way. He tried to dictate it and then go back. And he's like, it's a mess. And I'm like, yeah. Well, the reason is when you are bringing this stuff back up, it's bubbling up inside of you. I experienced this, especially with some of the more traumatic episodes, or not episodes, but the traumatic instances within the book, to where some of those chapters were written just with tears flowing down my face. And you were back in that valley experiencing that. But it's your brain is slowing down enough to process this and saying, hey, what actually happened down there? Can you put yourself at that visceral level? And when you do that, there's parts of that book that I have literally forgotten, not forgotten, but it's not in the back of my head all the time, to where it's like, I don't think about it unless I'm around some of the guys and that story comes up, or, I started going through some of the chapters of the book to be like, hey, what do we got to pull apart and everything for second edition. So there's something else in the works down the road.
Yes.
But Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, and that's another thing too, is it's like, hey, this book did pretty good, but guess what? I don't think it's perfect. And, I'm getting ready for print two. And I'm going to make the next one better than the last. Um, but going back and going back there in your head, letting your brain process that, it's therapeutic. It really is. It allows you to process it, and then it's not there anymore. That's one of the things with telling these stories, and these stories do need to be told about those guys out there, but it's not something I want to dwell on in that way. It's there are things that happen to you, but there are also things that happen for you. But don't get caught up in the minutia of it, of like, don't just let it constantly loop in your head there. That's not the place to be. That's not positive. The positive end is taking it and learning from it.
No, absolutely. And I love how you're talking about being driven. And I think it's so funny, I've dealt with so many successful people through my career, whether it's military, whether it's, doing celebrity bodyguard work and meeting famous people. It's so funny. And you just did it because I love it, because you're like, oh, I'm not a success, because you're driven. You can always do better. It's like, any infantry guy or combat guy that's built a fighting position. You never stop improving your fighting position.
Yep.
You're going to add this, you're going to add that. Oh, I put some tree limbs, those leaves wilted. The next day I got to replace that. Like, you're always trying to get better. And that's drive. And you got to have drive. And I love that. I see that in you. I see that in your work. And for all the listeners out there, get driven, because you can change and you can make your life better, and you will make other people's lives better in doing so. I know, Will, you were talking about, you were writing a book, it helped you in process, but look how many other people you've helped. I've experienced that same thing. I'm like, oh my God, you don't realize the work that you do when you're driven and you keep pushing forward, how that can be life-changing for not only you, your family, but pretty much the rest of the world. You don't know where those ripples, or the butterfly effect, as they say, goes out there.
Like, that right there, that ripple effect is insane. Like, so the book website, if you go to Damn the Valley Book, I have something on there called the Wall of Stories. All right. And the amount of people and the reach, I mean, we're talking, there was an instance where Lieutenant Mayfield was hit and he was bleeding from his head. It was a head wound. And we have Kiowa pilots circling. All right. And they're on station, and this guy is losing blood. And they're like, the medevac's on the way, but can we use one of the Kiowas maybe? Because this guy, he needs to get to roll 3 fast. They landed a Kiowa and actually tried loading him into it at the point. But the guy from that day reached out, and was like, this is my journal from the day. This is what happened from my perspective, and actually took pictures of them in the position, rendering first aid on Lieutenant Mayfield on the ground, like from the helicopter position. I've had other Kiowa pilots reach out that have flown over the Arghandab. Matter of fact, this week, I think this is the first week of May. So if you'll go back in it, because I don't know when these air, but this week is, there's one of them to where the guy actually is doing a gun run from the Kiowa cockpit. There's those. One of the EOD team had reached out, and he was actually on the incident to where Specialist Johnson was killed. He was alongside with us, and he was actually in Barnes and Noble. That story is nuts, because he was in Barnes and Noble and he's going through, and he sees on the spine, he sees the 82nd logo, and he sees Damn the Valley. And we had a plaque in front of Cop Johnston, that we turned the symbol anyway into a hat and other stuff that we wore on deployment. It's in the museum. So it said Damn the Valley. That was the saying out there. And he was just like, kind of approached it with hesitation, but he pulled it out and he opened it up, and he almost freaked out in the store. But he reached out and told me about it, and he had done a blog post about that day, about his own personal. And then he was just like, dude, after hearing it from your perspective, it changed everything for me, within that. And it was interesting to hear that end on how, that pulled apart the incident for him. Other guys that have read the book have reached out. I'm getting the smells from the valley. I'm reading through these pages, and all of a sudden I'm starting to smell the shit river and stuff. And that's how descriptive it is. And confirmed in one of the reviews on Amazon more recently, actually, they were like, hey man, if you got PTSD, like just beware. But the book was designed in that way. It was designed to have you face it, because if you look at the ebb and flow, there's times when it gets intense and then all of a sudden there's either a funny moment or a lull. And the general public doesn't understand those. I've had people, there's some of the bad reviews are like, man, this book's all over the place, or like, this is weird. Like it's, but anyone who's
welcome to a
been there,
deployment.
right? Yeah. And anyone who was in there, like, is like, dude, this book is that deployment. Like, thank you for writing this. And it's even gone so far as Afghans from out there. There was he was 10 years old at the time, and he's now living in the States. He went stateside. His family evacuated in 2012, but he reached out and said, thank you. And I'm like, that's nuts. As well as there's there's fanboys out there in the Arghandab River Valley. One of them sent in something. He did a motorcycle drive-by of the previous position a cop where he recognized the tri-walls and the surrounding landscape. And he was like, you got to be kidding me. And he sent in on social media, sent me the Facebook message of, hey, is this where this was? And I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. Because these were all kids back then and they remember us. It's nuts to think that way, that lasting effect, of the U.S. presence within that valley. Like, and I know this situation over in Afghanistan is horrible where it's gone and where it is right now, but we did leave an effect out there. It wasn't all for vain. And those guys need to know that too, because sometimes they can get down, down about that end. What was all this for and everything? It was like, you don't know those effects. You don't know how far reaching those effects were. You did something great, and some of those guys are continuing to do great things. It's amazing.
Yeah, no. And I like how you hit on that, because I struggled too. Like, that pullout was horrible with Afghanistan. Yeah. I mean, you couldn't do it any worse, I don't think. But we've given so much blood, treasure, sacrificed so much, people that have been over there, losing friends and buddy. It's just, well, what the heck? And we're just going to abandon. But when you step back and remove yourself a little bit, you have to do that. Don't look at the small micro picture of like what's happened in that moment. This is where we got to step back and look bigger. And I've been able to be like, you know what? Those people saw hope. They saw what things can be like. If anybody's following Legend, he's been on Sean Ryan. I've had the pleasure to meet Legend and talk to him. And, I've actually been in areas where his family's from and whatnot. And to hear what's still going on in the Afghan resistance and that belief and that hope and that freedom that's still out there. Yeah, we did a lot. So anyone that's struggling, and I know it sucks, I'm with you 100%. To be blunt, we fucked that up bad. And I want you to know, though, it's not for nothing. Mm-hmm. We have lasting effects, just like Will's talking about. There are things that we've done that are going to go down and change the world, and have changed the world, and will continue to change the world. With it be stories from men who've been over there, with it being experiences, with it actually being infrastructure that was changed, while we were there, that made the place better. All the buildings and things that we did, yeah, it sucks. We spent a lot of money there, but people will eventually, use them for good things, hopefully. Think positive. There's a lot of good work that's been done downrange. The U.S. Army, we get a lot of crap sometimes, the Marines or the military for that matter, that we just go over there and destroy and wreck things. And let me tell you, it's not that way. I used to try and tell people when I got back from Afghanistan, it was like, we're Peace Corps with guns. I mean, we were doing med caps, I'm helping deworm little kids as a fucking Green Beret. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then I was blowing indoors and pulling people out of their bed too, but that's the whole gambit of life. Some days it's sunny, some days it rains, sometimes it's a blizzard, sometimes it's a tornado, sometimes the ocean is calm. It's all part of life. So don't let any moment in time get you stuck and think that it's always going to be that way. Stay driven, keep moving forward. And Will, you are amazing. I love the work you're doing. I love the stories you're sharing. I love how you inspire people. And I know you were saying you're not a success. Well, you are a success, but I'm looking forward to see you be a bigger success because, man, you got it. You got the asset mindset. And that's why I try and tell people you don't have to be special forces to have the asset mindset.
No.
You know, you're taking ownership of your life. You're growing. You're moving forward. You're surrounding yourself with good people. And I've heard you say that repeatedly. And that's for anybody listening. That's what you need to realize. That is one of the greatest things that you can do is surround yourself with good people, positive people, people that are doing things and that have goals just like you do, or find a mentor. I tell you right now, Will, you were talking about helping someone with their book. Like, that's incredible. And we're happy to do it. And
Yes.
people that are above you, well, they'll see your passion or your desire to improve and that drive, and they're going to want to help you. They're going to want to share with you. They will gladly teach you. And if they don't, well, then guess what? You probably didn't want to learn from them anyways. But anybody who's doing something worthwhile, they want to share that knowledge. They want to help lift other people up. And that's having the asset mindset. So if you liked what you heard today, please take a moment, pause, and subscribe to the Asset Mindset Podcast. Follow me on Instagram. You can follow and find the podcast on Spotify. We're out there. Do a Google search. Go to theassetmindset.com. Check out my book. Check out Will's book and follow him so you can get his new book that's going to be released. So, Will, with that, I would like to give you another opportunity to close out and maybe share one principle that you've learned in your life with mindset that you can share with our audience and help them grow.
I mean, I'm just going to go back and regurgitate the one that is about, stop thinking about why is this happening to me? It's why is this happening? Like, life happens for you. It really does. Like, you have to change your thinking in that way of like, what do you have to overcome? Where's the break in it? You can't give up. You got to use that resilience that you have built in, but stay on that path. I don't know the other ones that have heard this, but I know my command always used to say hard right over easy wrong, and stay on that right path. Don't take the shortcut, go the long way. In building this stuff, I reached out. You would be surprised who I reached out to. I was also surprised though with who came back with stuff, but there was things to where I'm like, I cannot break through here. What's going on with this? And I really had to learn how to do it myself. I didn't get the shortcut. I didn't get someone who was like, oh yeah, talk to this person or make that introduction. I had to learn how to do it. And then through that, change your mindset of become so dang good at what you're doing that you can help other people out, that it won't be ignored anymore. And people will start coming to you and saying, man, this guy made it through this. Like, how did he do it? Because they'll start coming out. Once you have the knowledge of how to do something like this, they'll start coming out and asking you questions. And you really have to look back and say, look at what you went through during it. Like, now how can you pass that knowledge along and coach them? Because you know how you felt during it. Like, don't do it for them, but show them the framework, show them how it was done, and be, again, this is the name of your podcast, be that asset out there instead of the person tearing other people down.
Absolutely. And find asset mindset teammates. They're out there. Build them, build your team. Like I use the whole Special Forces ODA, example. When you're in, you have this team with all these subject matter experts. Well, guess what? Build that for your life. Build your own ODA. Build your team with subject matter experts of things that you need. So you can do it. So honored and glad to have you on the show. I love dealing with people that have the asset mindset. Sometimes they don't even know they have it, and they have it. It's a fantastic thing. And man, I wish this could go on even longer because I still want to pick your brain about some of the SOPC stuff and when you came in and what your time frame, because I'm an 18 X-ray also.
Nice.
And I went through SOPC and I lived in Delta 2105, the old World War school buildings. And I also came in late. I enlisted at 27 and turned 28 in basic training. One of my drill sergeants pulled me in and he's like, "What the fuck are you doing here?" And I'm like, "What do you mean, drill sergeant?" He's like, "You're 28 years old. You have a 4-year college degree. You have a real estate license," because, they got a file on us. Yeah. And he's like, "You're going 11 Bravo to then try and be a Green Beret." And, it was after 9/11. I was like, being patriotic and I should serve. And he's like, "All right, that's your answer." He's like, "Why didn't you go into OCS? You got a 4-year degree." I'm like, "Because if I went to OCS, then I'd be going to the regular Army and I wouldn't be able to go to selection for a couple of years and whatnot." And I'm like, I wanted to go, and I think you've said this in the past as well, like, I want to serve with the best. Yes. Like, if I'm going to war, because guys at our time frame knew when you enlisted, you're going down range. Like, OEF, OIF, GWAT was fucking raging. And I'm like, I want to go with guys that are going to really fight with me and be badass. Like, that's who I want to go with. And luckily, I was able to make it. I actually got held up in med hold too at SOPSI. I tore my rectus femoris head during SOPSI. And luckily, I didn't quit. I was popping Motrin like crazy. Did the last PT test. They were getting ready to go to send us to selection. And I'm like, I can't go to selection with the freaking torn muscle in my, right leg. And so I raised my hand. I'm like, "Hey, I got to go to the sick call and mention." So luckily, I was able to stay and work there as a corporal for a little while. So I don't know, maybe we crossed paths. So when were you going through SOPSI?
So SOPSI, let's see, that's 2008. The cadre there, the names again, Pickney and Siver. So if you know those two, and Holst was out at SOPSI, he was out. I guess they kind of broke the team up. The three of those guys were on ODA all together in 7th, and I don't know how they all ended up as cadre. But if you recognize those names, then we were definitely there about the same time.
I was there 04. So I was early SOPSI.
Okay. Way
early SOPSI. Yeah, you didn't have to shave your head back then.
Oh, yeah, you did.
No, I didn't. Oh, man. It was while I was in call and I just gone to selection and come back because I was still staying there because I was helping during medical because I was older, like I said. Yeah. And so I was like helping with formations and being a runner or whatever was needed by the cadre. Yeah. And so, I got to stay and see a lot of the changes. Like, we had a big gong that, like the SEALs have the bell. There was a gong that you had to go in front of everybody and like hit this big gong and say why you're quitting and all that. And just, people don't know. I mean, SOPSI, it's probably the best thing to prepare you for combat. I don't know, as far as the stress and whatnot. I mean, it's not the same. It's a totally different animal, but there's no way to really duplicate the stress of combat. We all know that, you
absolutely
just can't.
Not. Absolutely
boy,
not.
those guys, they put you through the ringer. It actually made selection easy.
Yes. Yeah. I know afterwards, like, so after I got back from the Argondob, I went back to selection and, passed through that phase. Selection was simple after the Argondob, but also like it made me think too. I'm like, man, I could have done this. Like, why did I go to med hold after that? Like, I could have just toughed it out. I mean, maybe so, maybe not. I don't know. But whatever the case, honestly, looking back on it and everything, I'm glad that portion happened the way that it did, just because, number one, I met some of the best people that I'll ever know, through that particular deployment. I don't think you could ever recreate it. But then seeing that progression and then going back through selection and going, oh, okay, I got it now. I was told by one of the cadre on the way out the door, they're like, we're doing you a favor in this way. I didn't see it at the time, but in a way now I do see it as that way, to where it was like, you had a hellacious experience, but it's really shaped and molded a lot of what you've done going on. So thank you. Yeah,
the Lord works in mysterious ways. God's got a plan. It's his plan, not our plan. We try and work it. I never thought I'd be an author. Did you think you'd be an author?
Oh, heck no.
Like it just, but
Well, and
stuff happens.
that's the other thing too. And this is something that Denny's going to want to mark if he's in the background doing this producing end of things. But that flag and a bunch of artifacts from the stories in the book, you can actually go down to the special Airborne and Special Operations Museum in downtown Fayetteville. And we had the book launch there, but all that stuff is now in the DoD historical archives as a piece of history to be preserved for perpetuity. So, I mean, as long as the United States is around and the DoD museums are there it is, just like Indiana Jones. This belongs in a museum. Well, there it
That's
is.
fantastic.
And I would have never, ever thought that this would have been, brought, and I would have had this piece be part of it, of getting this story, to that level out there. That to me is just, it's special. I'm glad that I've kind of listened along the way, and I'm glad I took that plunge and listened to that voice in the background that said, hey man, you really should put these stories down. Cause I could have just discounted it, and I didn't, leaned into it, and here we are.
No, that's another great point for all you listeners out there. Listen to your gut, listen to spirit, listen to guidance, that little voice in your head, it's there for a reason, and when it's telling you doubt, that's the other side. There's the positive and the negative. But if you have something that's itching in there, that little voice or that gut feeling where you need to be doing something. And I know anyone who's listening out there, there's something you could be doing. There's something in there that's eating at you. So get out there and do it. Figure it out. Don't be the I can't. Figure, how do I? Get that how do I mentality, because you can do it. Might take a little time, but you can do it.
Daniel, man, 100% right there.
Hey, Will, I got to thank you for being here today. And for all the listeners out there, take a moment, follow Will, go into our description. There's links in this description where you can follow and find Will. Please go in there and give me a follow and subscription as well if you like the content that you heard today and you believe in the asset mindset and positivity and good mental health. Give us a follow. It really helps. And let's help get this algorithm going so we can get out there and help more people, because Will and I are trying to make the world a better place, and you can help us do it. Thank you. Thank you, Will. Thank you, listeners. God bless you all, and see you next time on the Asset Mindset Podcast.